"Miss, you can't carry that around the store." The manager's voice, Sterling Vance, cut across the quiet electronics section, sharp and demanding enough for nearby shoppers to hear. Phones lifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Serafina Vance, 19, calm and unshaken, simply held the $5,000 laptop box. "I'm ready to buy this," she said softly, refusing to look away from his judgmental eyes. His smirk didn't reach his eyes. "There's a payment plan desk downstairs, sweetheart," he replied, implying she couldn't afford it outright, delivering sugar and venom in the same breath. The room went quiet. A few patrons shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should intervene. Sarah didn't move. She didn't argue. She just watched, every second of the humiliation measured, every word remembered. Finally, she whispered, calm but deadly certain, "You'll regret speaking to me that way." Sterling turned away, oblivious to the quiet storm of genius and generational vengeance he had just unleashed. But Sarah knew one thing. He had no idea who she really was. By the time she unzipped her worn university backpack, everything in that store had already changed. Stop. Before we get into the story, tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from. Serafina Vance, Sarah to everyone who loved her, was just 19 years old, but she carried the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. Her brief background wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to grit and genius born in the cramped spaces of an old North Carolina neighborhood. She was a computer science prodigy, one of the sharpest minds at her state university, and her entire life was focused on one goal: lifting her family out of the struggle that had always been their shadow. That Monday afternoon, she walked into the Tech Ledge, a gleaming, expensive electronics store in the wealthy part of town, feeling a nervousness that had nothing to do with the price tags and everything to do with the look she knew she'd get. She needed a specific, high-powered laptop for a confidential research project, the kind of machine that cost more than some people's used cars. She made a beeline for the professional workstation aisle, her modest jeans and vintage university hoodie standing out against the sleek, tailored suits of the salespeople. It was the low point of the chapter, a quiet, routine moment of browsing, except it wasn't routine at all. She felt the shift immediately. First, it was the sound of hushed voices nearby, then the reflection of a man in a poorly fitting polo shirt lingering just a little too long near the audio gear. She didn't need to look up to know they were talking about her. The air grew thick with suspicion, like a sudden storm rolling in. The two employees, a middle-aged man with a thin mustache named Gary and a young woman with a bored expression, began their slow, deliberate dance. They pretended to straighten display models, but their eyes, sharp and calculating, never left Sarah. Every time she moved, they moved. Every time she touched a box, they stiffened. The humiliation, slow and creeping, began to burn her chest. It was the high point of the chapter, the tension twisting into an emotional knot. She felt their assumptions screaming across the clean, white floor. She doesn't belong here, and she's planning to steal. She closed her eyes for a brief second, took a deep breath, and let the rage settle into a cold, hard resolve. Sarah finally located the machine, the $4,500 Titan laptop she'd spent months saving for. She slid the heavy box off the shelf, her movements slow and deliberate, daring them to say something. The two employees instantly closed the gap, trapping her near the aisle. She marched straight toward the main customer service counter, carrying the physical weight of the laptop and the emotional weight of their judgment. The manager, Sterling, a guy who looked like he'd been manager since college, met her halfway, a forced, patronizing smile on his face. He watched her approach the register, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, the final barrier. Sarah's chin came up, a look of pure, cold defiance settling on her face. She reached into her worn backpack, bypassing the small zippered pouch where her debit card usually rested. With a loud, deliberate rustle that echoed in the quiet store, she pulled out a thick, clean stack of US $100 bills, neatly banded together. She slapped the cash down on the counter, the stack landing with a solid, satisfying thud, instantly silencing the humming of the display computers and the whispers of the staff. Sarah's memory often went back to her grandmother, Maeve. Maeve wasn't just family. She was the foundation, the steel beneath the cheap plywood of their lives. Maeve had been Sarah's first coding teacher, not with computers, but with the patient, logical puzzle of budgeting pennies and figuring out how to make 2 jobs equal 3. As a child, Sarah's brilliance was obvious, her hands always itching to take things apart and put them back together better. The low event of this chapter was the quiet, heavy conversation they had one summer evening after Maeve got home from her second shift, her uniform stained with grease and fatigue. "People gonna look at you, Sarah," Maeve had murmured, her voice soft but worn, while gently massaging her tired feet. "They see your skin first, and they make up a whole story before you even open your mouth. Your granddaddy, he faced that. I faced that. It means you gotta be twice as quiet, twice as smart, and twice as prepared." Maeve then explained, in vague, painful detail, a time when a bank had unfairly denied her a loan years ago, costing her the chance to open a small business, a dream that died because of the color of her skin. The injustice, though historical, felt fresh and real, a generational wound passed down to Sarah. Sarah remembered feeling a cold flash of resolve that night, vowing she would never let that happen to her. She wanted to build a world where Maeve could simply rest. But the financial struggle was a constant beast, and the high event was the extreme realization of how close they were to the edge. Maeve was hiding things. The electricity bill was past due, the refrigerator was mostly empty, and the medication bottles for Maeve's high blood pressure were almost gone. Sarah knew every penny was going toward her tuition and her textbooks. One morning, the extreme event hit without warning. Sarah woke up to silence. She found Maeve on the kitchen floor, the phone just out of reach, her body shaking from exhaustion and a sudden, terrifying health scare. The sound of the ambulance sirens was the loudest, most frightening sound Sarah had ever heard. In the chaos of the emergency room, Sarah felt the full force of their vulnerability. She felt the weight of her love and her desperate need to succeed. She held Maeve's frail hand, tears streaming down her face, and made a silent, ferocious promise to herself, a vow that burned deep in her heart. "I won't let you down," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, staring at the ceiling of the brightly lit, sterile room. "I will make you proud. I will make sure we never have to worry about anything again." Back in the present, the moment hung thick in the air at the tech ledge. The sudden presence of a massive pile of cash, crisp $100 bills, had paralyzed the checkout area. Sterling, the manager, was completely blindsided, his condescending air melting away into a patchy sweat. His eyes darted nervously between the huge pile of money and Sarah's unwavering gaze. The low event was the cashier, a young man named Ethan, stammering and apologizing as he awkwardly began the tedious process of counting the bills, his hands trembling slightly. Sarah stood silent, refusing to make eye contact with Sterling or Gary, the man who had followed her. She allowed the awkward silence to grow, letting the shame of their previous assumptions settle heavily on their shoulders. When Ethan finally finished counting, he looked up, wide-eyed. He confirmed the total was far more than the price of the laptop, plus tax. Sterling, scrambling to regain control, finally stepped forward, forcing a plastic smile. "I apologize for the misunderstanding, ma'am. Store policy, you know. High-value items. We just need to confirm." Sarah cut him off with a single, slow shake of her head. Her voice, when it came, was soft but carried a chilling finality. "I know what you needed to confirm, sir, and it wasn't store policy." She looked Sterling directly in the eye, and the power dynamic flipped completely. She waited for him to authorize the transaction, watching him visibly shrink under her scrutiny. It was a profound emotional high for her, a small, quiet victory against a lifetime of being underestimated. Ethan packaged the laptop, placing the leftover change and receipt on the counter. Sarah reached into her bag, pulled out a large, heavy-duty duffel bag, the kind used for gym equipment or travel, and placed the laptop inside. She paused, then turned away from the counter, but she didn't head for the exit. She took 3 slow steps back to the display wall, her eyes scanning the items that Gary and Sterling had guarded so fiercely just moments before. She stopped in front of the photography display, which featured a top-of-the-line camera body and a set of expensive lenses, a total price tag even higher than the laptop. Sterling watched her, his face a mask of confusion and mounting dread. She reached out, running a finger along the price tag of a professional-grade video camera, her gaze still focused. It was the extreme event that served as the cliffhanger. She looked up at Sterling, who was now sweating profusely. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I think I'll be needing a complete set. That camera, all those lenses, and a dozen high-speed memory cards. Just add it to my tab. I'll be paying in the same cash." The scene shifts back in time to Serafina's teenage years, a time of relentless work and quiet desperation. After Maeve's health scare, Sarah had dropped out of almost everything extracurricular to earn money. She worked a low event of small, demeaning jobs, including washing dishes at a local diner, where the head chef constantly snapped at her, and briefly stocking shelves at a cheap convenience store, where the owner regularly shortchanged her paychecks. She endured a constant string of small humiliations, being spoken down to, having her schedules inexplicably cut, and never receiving the respect her work deserved. Her quiet intelligence was wasted on minimum wage tasks, but every dollar went home. She would spend her nights in her room, hunched over a 5-year-old desktop computer, teaching herself advanced programming and networking concepts using textbooks borrowed from the public library. The low point was the deep loneliness she felt, knowing her peers were enjoying high school dances and football games while she was on her 4th shift of the week. But the work was a distraction, a way to channel her focus. This quiet, intense study led to the extreme event, the turning point in her life. One night, while researching a cloud migration project for her own academic practice, she stumbled across an alarming weakness. She discovered a gaping security vulnerability in the system of a major regional cybersecurity firm, a flaw so obvious and dangerous that it left millions of records exposed. Her heart pounding, Sarah spent 2 days writing a meticulous, detailed report on the vulnerability, outlining exactly how to fix it, and sent it to the company's anonymous security contact portal. She received no immediate response, which was the final low of the period, a familiar feeling of being ignored. A week later, she got a strangely worded, encrypted email. The sender identified themselves only as Chiron and offered her a remote, freelance consultancy gig for a sum that made her gasp. They wanted her to test their systems for other flaws, paying her a massive hourly rate. This was the dramatic high point, the secret key that unlocked her future. Maeve knew she was doing remote work, but she didn't know the exact nature or the compensation. The final cliffhanger event occurred late one evening. Sarah was at the old, sticky keyboard when her bank account notification pinged. She logged in, expecting her small paycheck from the convenience store. Instead, she stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, tears blurring her vision. The number was massive, easily enough to pay off Maeve's medical bills and cover tuition for years. This was her first large payment from Chiron, her first taste of true financial freedom, and she had earned it all in secret. The present moment was pure theater, a single, powerful act of revenge served cold. The professional camera equipment, valued at over $8,000, was being rung up. Sterling, the manager, looked like he might faint, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. Gary and the other employee were now hovering further away, trying desperately to appear busy. The low event was the prolonged, painful silence as Ethan, the cashier, struggled to process the immense transaction, entering codes, and counting the next stack of cash Sarah had calmly produced. Every second the transaction took felt like an hour, amplifying the discomfort and humiliation of the store staff. Sarah watched them, not with anger, but with a detached, clinical observation. They had judged her based on their stereotypes, and she was forcing them to reckon with the error of their assumptions. The feeling wasn't sweet. It was empowering, a validation of every struggle she and Maeve had endured. When the register finally beeped, printing a receipt almost a foot long, Ethan managed a weak, "Thank you for your business, ma'am." Sarah took the receipt and a massive duffel bag, which now contained nearly $13,000 worth of electronics. This was the high event, the peak of her personal triumph. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she turned, facing the assembled employees, Sterling, Gary, and the other curious sales associates who had gathered to watch the incredible sight. She walked a few steps away from the counter and then stopped in the center of the pristine white tile floor. She unzipped the duffel bag just enough to reveal the laptop box, then reached in her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She clicked open the camera app and began recording, a defiant look in her eyes. The extreme event, the final, powerful cliffhanger, was her addressing the camera, but speaking directly to the men in the store. "I'm recording this," Sarah announced, her voice echoing clearly throughout the store. "Because the way I was treated in here today, the way I was followed and suspected before I even reached the register, is a serious problem. I just spent thousands of dollars in cash, which I earned. And I want to make sure the world sees how the tech ledge treats customers who don't fit their narrow, preconceived ideas of who can afford to shop here." She gave the camera a direct, pointed look. "I'm taking this receipt and this story to the highest level. Your company is going to answer for this. If you're loving the story so far, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story." The immediate high of Sarah's public stand at the electronics store quickly faded, leaving her grounded in the quiet, deeper pains of her past. One of the sharpest pains traced back to her childhood best friend, Bryn. They were two peas in a pod growing up, sharing secrets and dreams over cheap sodas on Maeve's porch. Bryn, with her bright, slightly chaotic energy, was Sarah's anchor, the person who made the hard times feel less lonely. The low event of this chapter was the memory of a simple, beautiful moment. They were sitting on a rickety swing set, Bryn swearing on everything sacred that they would always stick together, that she would be there when Sarah finally made it big. "We're a team, Sarah," Bryn had said, hands sticky with melted popsicle juice. "Nothing breaks this, but something did break it." The fracture came sharply, without warning, creating an extreme and profound heartbreak. Bryn's family, who had always struggled to keep up appearances, suddenly announced they were moving 2 states away for a better opportunity. Sarah was devastated, but prepared for long phone calls and summer visits. What she wasn't prepared for was the silence. The day Bryn moved, she stopped responding to texts, blocked Sarah on social media, and disappeared as if she had never existed. The friendship didn't just end, it was surgically removed. It was a deep, raw betrayal. Sarah spent months replaying every conversation, every shared laugh, trying to pinpoint the moment she messed up, never finding an answer. The emotional extreme was the weight of that abandonment, a feeling far heavier than any store manager's glare. She had lost her one constant, her safety net, and it confirmed a painful truth she had been told. You can only ever truly rely on yourself and your family. The world was full of promises, and most of them were cheap and disposable, just like the dollar toys they used to buy. The final, wrenching event was the day she saw the moving van. It was huge and white, sitting outside Bryn's little house. Sarah ran down the street, calling Bryn's name, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Bryn sitting in the passenger seat of her mother's SUV, sunglasses covering her eyes. Bryn turned her head slowly, saw Sarah standing there, breathless and desperate, and then, in a devastating moment that felt like a punch to the gut, she deliberately looked away. Bryn refused to meet Sarah's gaze, driving off without a backward glance, leaving Sarah standing alone on the curb, knowing their chapter was closed forever. Sarah left the tech ledge, her heart thumping not from fear, but from the righteous tremor of adrenaline. She hadn't been home an hour before the quiet digital world she inhabited exploded into the loud, messy reality of the viral moment. The video she recorded, combined with security footage discreetly leaked by Ethan, the cashier, was everywhere. The extreme event of the chapter was the sheer speed and scale of the public outrage. The store's name was trending, and people were passionately sharing Sarah's face and her story, demanding consequences for the racist behavior. Back at the Finch Corporation headquarters, the parent company that owned the tech ledge, the atmosphere was icy. The CEO, Alastair Finch, a man known for his calm, calculated control, was watching the footage in his corner office. Alastair was furious, not just at the bad publicity, but the sheer stupidity and cruelty of his employees. The low event involved Sterling, the manager, and Gary, who were nervously attempting to justify their actions to the internal affairs team, mumbling excuses about loss prevention protocols and suspicious purchasing behavior. Their flimsy excuses did nothing to stop the inevitable. The high event was Alastair Finch's swift, brutal corporate justice. He didn't wait for the PR department. He walked into the internal meeting room, the video still playing on a large monitor, and with a single sharp sentence, he fired Sterling, Gary, and anyone else who had stood by and watched. He made it clear this wasn't just about PR. It was about principle. "We sell technology." Alastair's voice boomed in the quiet room. "We don't sell judgment." The controversy only intensified when the news broke that the employees had been fired, sparking debates online about racism versus management rights. Alastair then turned his attention to Sarah. He saw more than just a victim of a bad policy. He saw the intellect behind the decisive, recorded confrontation. He saw a young woman with the presence of mind to turn a moment of humiliation into a point of power. He saw someone who understood leverage. Alastair turned to his chief of staff, his eyes still fixed on Sarah's image on the screen, a determined look settling on his face. "I need to meet her," he stated firmly. "Find that girl. She's not just getting an apology. She's getting an opportunity." The hospital room where Maeve was recovering was a quiet, low-lit space, a stark contrast to the flash and noise of Sarah's viral moment. This was the low event of the chapter, a period of quiet emotional healing and profound reflection for both women. Sarah kept the laptop box hidden and avoided mentioning the store incident, focusing only on Maeve's slow recovery. She would read Maeve old books and quietly work on her laptop in the corner, grateful for the stability her secret income provided. But the silence allowed the past to creep into the present. One afternoon, while discussing the rising cost of property taxes, Maeve grew quiet, her gaze distant. She then revealed an extreme, generational secret that shook Sarah to her core. Their small, unassuming house was not an inheritance, as Sarah had always been told. It was the prize of a long, vicious legal battle Maeve had fought decades ago. A wealthy, prominent local family had tried to cheat Maeve out of the land, using dirty legal tricks and systemic bias to take what was rightfully hers. They wanted the land. Maeve whispered, her voice strained, the painful memory returning. They wanted to push us out, said we weren't suitable neighbors. I fought them, Sarah, alone. It cost me everything, but I won. This was the emotional high event, the dramatic revelation that explained Maeve's deep, almost visceral distrust of anyone with money or institutional power. It was the source of her wisdom and her caution. The knowledge that her grandmother was a quiet warrior, a fighter who had won against immense odds, filled Sarah with a fierce, protective love. Suddenly, a monitor began to loudly beep, a harsh, unexpected noise that ripped through the quiet room. Maeve's breathing became shallow. and her eyes rolled back slightly. It was a severe health scare, a sudden, terrifying climax that reminded Sarah how fragile their foundation was. Nurses rushed in, pushing Sarah aside, working quickly to stabilize her grandmother. As the commotion subsided and Maeve's vitals steadied, she looked up at Sarah, her eyes glazed but focused. With a final, desperate gasp, she whispered a name, the name of the family who had spent years trying to ruin her, the name of the people who had tried to steal their home. The family name was Vance. Sarah was navigating a surreal, unfamiliar world. She was still a 19-year-old student, but she was also a viral sensation, a symbol of resistance, and the reluctant face of a controversy. This was the low event of the chapter, the crushing weight of unexpected attention. Reporters were calling, emails were flooding her inbox, and her social media comments were a chaotic mix of praise and vicious skepticism. She felt overwhelmed, constantly looking over her shoulder. She realized that going viral meant losing the simple privacy she had always valued. The extreme event arrived in the form of a formal, sealed letter delivered by a private courier. It was from Alastair Finch. The letter contained a lengthy, sincere apology, a detailed explanation of the disciplinary action taken, and an invitation to meet him immediately. Sarah went, cautious but intrigued, taking the meeting at a quiet, neutral office building downtown. Alastair was charming, direct, and completely disarming. He didn't offer her a gift card or a discount. He offered her a life-changing job. This was the emotional high point. Alastair proposed that Sarah join Finch Corporation in a high-profile capacity, working directly under him to overhaul their technology division's diversity and inclusion initiatives. He saw her as an asset, a brilliant mind with an unparalleled, lived perspective. "I don't want a PR stunt, Sarah," he told her, leaning forward earnestly. "I want you to build the systems that prevent this kind of bias from ever happening again. Your job is to be our conscience, built into the code." It was an incredible validation of her talent, a chance to get paid exponentially more than her freelance work, and to make a real, lasting change. Sarah, after careful consideration and a guarded acceptance, agreed. The final cliffhanger came when Alastair leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "There's a reason I need someone outside the system to do this," he admitted. "I have a suspicion that the problem isn't just accidental bias. I think someone highly placed is actively sabotaging our hiring process. I need you to find the corruption that's been festering here for years." Preparing for her new, high-stakes role felt like walking a tightrope. Sarah spent the days between the job offer and her start date cycling through extreme emotions: anxiety about corporate culture, excitement about the technology, and the persistent fear of the unknown. This quiet preparation was the low event of the chapter, a period of isolation where she buried herself in research papers and corporate policy manuals. She felt the absence of a true, confidant deeply, the loss of Bryn still a dull ache. She realized she couldn't share this immense opportunity with anyone but Maeve, and even then, only in vague terms. The setting shifted dramatically when Sarah went to her university campus to formally withdraw from her classes for the semester, putting her research on hold. The campus was huge and bustling, and Sarah felt small again, just a girl in an oversized hoodie trying to navigate the crowds. The extreme event, the sudden, high-voltage shock of the unexpected, hit her in the middle of the quad. Across the busy lawn, near the main fountain, she saw a familiar face. She froze, dropping the pen she was holding. It was Bryn, her old best friend. Bryn looked different now. She was dressed in sharp, expensive fashion, carrying a designer bag, clearly a successful, vibrant university student in the design program. The physical proximity after years of absolute silence was a jarring, emotional high, flooding Sarah with a mix of betrayal and desperate longing. Every painful memory of the moving van and the blocked calls rushed back. Bryn was laughing with a group of friends when she happened to turn her head. Her eyes swept across the quad, and then they landed directly on Sarah. For a split second, the easy laughter vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, panicked shock. Then, just as quickly, the shock gave way to an emotion Sarah couldn't quite place. It was a flicker of something unreadable. Was it guilt, regret, or maybe even fear? Sarah stood perfectly still, watching as Bryn's face morphed from surprise to a calculated, forced blankness. But before she could turn away entirely, Bryn did something unexpected. Bryn's eyes darted quickly to her group of friends and back to Sarah, a silent communication passing between them. The shock of seeing her childhood betrayer on her university campus was immense, and Sarah wondered if this chance encounter was a sign that her complicated past was about to collide with her brand-new future. If you're still enjoying this story, share this video with someone that needs to watch this video. Sarah stepped into the headquarters of Finch Corporation, a shining tower of glass and steel that felt a million miles away from Maeve's modest house. She was 19, with no official corporate experience, reporting directly to the CEO. The atmosphere was immediately chilly. The low event of her first week was the skepticism, a quiet, professional form of suspicion that was almost worse than the yelling at the tech ledge. During her first departmental meeting, older white male engineers, who had been there for decades, asked pointed questions, challenging her credentials and her right to be leading them. They smiled politely, but their eyes said, "You're a kid, and you're only here because of a viral video." Sarah didn't argue. She waited. She spent weeks absorbing data, listening to the gossip, and quietly mapping the company's hiring pipeline. The time for talking ended when she stood up to present her project, a revolutionary AI algorithm designed not just to eliminate bias, but to actively hunt for and promote overlooked talent from non-traditional schools and backgrounds. It was a digital search engine built on empathy. The emotional high was the silence in the room as she finished her presentation. No one clapped. They were too stunned. She had provided not just a solution, but irrefutable proof of how the old, manual system was failing. The engineers' faces, once dismissive, now showed professional awe and a grudging respect. Sarah had silenced the skeptics with pure, undeniable genius. She'd established herself as the real deal, not a token hire. After the meeting cleared out, Alastair Finch stayed behind, his expression serious. He praised her brilliance, calling her the sharpest mind he'd hired in years. He then pulled up a highly encrypted file on his screen. "This is the true reason you're here, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping low. "I need you to build the systems that prevent this kind of bias from ever happening again. Your job is to be our conscience, built into the code." It was an incredible validation of her talent, a chance to get paid exponentially more than her freelance work, and to make a real, lasting change. Alastair then leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "There's a reason I need someone outside the system to do this," he admitted. "I have a suspicion that the problem isn't just accidental bias. I think someone highly placed is actively sabotaging our hiring process. I need you to find the corruption that's been festering here for years." The high of corporate success was immediately complicated by the reappearance of her past. Sarah and Bryn began a cautious, awkward dance of reconnection. They met for coffee near campus, the low event of the chapter being the painful attempts to pretend the years of silence never happened. Bryn was still beautiful, but beneath the designer clothes, Sarah could sense a frantic, unhappy energy. Bryn confided that her family was in deep financial trouble. Her dad had lost his job, and they were drowning in debt. She cried, saying she felt trapped and ashamed. Sarah, still hurting from the past betrayal, felt a painful mix of pity and suspicion. Then, the emotional extreme hit, revealing the old treachery wasn't just a memory. It was a repeating pattern. Sarah was visiting Maeve, who was finally home and recovering. A strange man from Bryn's family arrived unannounced, holding an envelope. He acted friendly, talking about old times, then quickly brought up Maeve's small, inherited piece of land. He offered to pay for Maeve's outstanding medical bills, a sizable, tempting sum, if Maeve would agree to sell that land for a ridiculously low, insulting price. It was a clear attempt to take advantage of their current health crisis and financial vulnerability. Sarah watched, sickened, as the man laid out the predatory offer, leveraging Maeve's love for her daughter against her ownership of the home. The man, slick and professional, looked entirely too pleased with himself, twisting the knife further. As the man finally left, Sarah saw a car parked down the street, barely visible behind a large oak tree. It was Bryn's mother's car. Bryn was sitting inside, her face hidden in the shadows. Sarah realized Bryn hadn't just told her mother about Maeve's illness. She had been part of this cruel, calculated attempt to manipulate them. The betrayal was deliberate, not accidental. Sarah plunged into the secretive work Alistair had given her, determined to use her new power to fight back against the kind of systemic injustice that had nearly broken her grandmother. The initial low event was the sheer tedium of the task. She spent long nights digging deep into Finch Corp's source code, past the user interface, and into the hidden layers of their decades-old hiring algorithms. It was like sifting through sand for a single diamond, checking lines of code that seemed innocuous but felt intuitively wrong. She found strange variable names and functions that seemed overly complicated, especially in the initial candidate filtering stages. The emotional contrast came when she realized the complication wasn't sloppy programming. It was deliberate camouflage. This culminated in the extreme event, the shocking discovery of the corporate traitor. Deep within the core filtering mechanism, Sarah found a hidden script, a brilliantly coded poison pill. It was designed to automatically and subtly downgrade any application flag with identifiers associated with non-white or female names, or with universities outside a small, elite list. It wasn't accidental bias. It was a manually constructed digital wall. The author of the code was a senior executive, the head of global talent acquisition, a powerful man named Sterling Vance Sr. Sarah stared at the code block, where his digital signature was still visible. She felt a cold wave of realization wash over her. Not only was the man running a systemic racist operation, but his last name was the same as the family who had harassed Maeve decades ago, the family Maeve had named in the hospital. The sense of conspiracy tightened, pulling the past into the present. She printed the evidence, her hand shaking slightly. It felt too big, too personal, a generational hatred, now playing out in the high-stakes world of corporate America. Sarah wrestled with the explosive implications of her discovery. The name Vance meant the store humiliation, the corporate plot, and her grandmother's decades-old fight were all linked by blood. She knew she couldn't take this full truth to Alistair without confirming the connection to the family's land scheme. She had to talk to Bryn. The low event was the tense, emotional meeting Sarah demanded with Bryn in a quiet corner of the campus library, the same library where they had once studied together. Sarah confronted Bryn with the facts, laying out the timeline, the land scheme, the family name, and the corporate sabotage. She watched as Bryn's carefully constructed facade shattered. Bryn burst into tears, the shame and guilt finally overwhelming her. It was a heartbreaking moment, a mix of pure, raw betrayal and deep pity. The emotional high was Bryn's painful, dramatic confession. She admitted that her father, desperate for money, had reached out to his distant cousin, Sterling Vance Sr., for help. Sterling Sr. was the one who had told them about the old family grudge over Maeve's land and suggested using the health scare as leverage to finally take it back, promising them a huge cut. Bryn admitted she had driven her mother to Maeve Street, feeling sick the entire time, because her father threatened to cut her off financially if she didn't participate. Bryn was hysterical, But her confession was a critical breakthrough. She pulled a dusty, old flash drive from her backpack. "My father is terrified of his cousin, Sterling Sr., but he keeps everything," Bryn confessed, shoving the drive into Sarah's hand. "All their emails, all the schemes, everything about the land and the money, it's all on here. You need to see this." Sarah immediately took the flash drive to Alistair Finch. The low event was Alistair's visible emotional collapse as they reviewed the content. The drive contained proof of the land scheme, along with years of correspondence between Sterling Vance Sr. and Bryn's father, detailing their coordinated efforts to manipulate Maeve. Alistair, a man who prided himself on ethical leadership, was utterly devastated that this rot had festered under his nose. The feeling in the room was heavy with disappointment and anger. The tension climbed into an extreme high when they connected the dots to the larger corporate crime. The flash drive confirmed that Sterling Vance Sr. had developed the racist AI not just to sabotage Finch Corp's hiring process, but as a marketable product. He was actively planning to sell the biased technology, branded as a discreet talent filtering solution, to other Fortune 500 companies in a massive illegal side deal. The conspiracy was now global in its ambition, built on a local, bitter family feud. And then came the final, shocking realization. Sterling Vance Sr., the corporate executive who orchestrated the racist software, was the father of Sterling Vance Jr., the manager at the tech ledge who had humiliated Sarah. The initial public shame she faced was not random bad luck. It was a direct, personal assault from the family that had been trying to destroy her grandmother for decades. Sarah felt a surge of cold, focused anger. The fight had come full circle. It was no longer just about a laptop or a job. It was about avenging the quiet suffering of her grandmother and dismantling a generational injustice. She now held the key to bringing down an entire generation of corruption. The only piece missing was the final, devastating evidence needed to ensure Sterling Vance Sr.'s complete downfall, and Sarah knew exactly where she might find it. If you're loving this story so far, smash that like button and let us know with a fire emoji in the comments. The key to unraveling the entire, ugly generational conflict lay with Sterling Vance Jr., the store manager who had first humiliated Sarah. It was a difficult, emotional confrontation, the low event of this chapter. Sarah met him in a secluded park, showing him the emails detailing his father's scheme, the land grab, and the generational connection to Maeve. Sterling Jr., initially defensive, grew pale with shame as he saw the evidence of his father's deep-seated prejudice and corporate sabotage. He was heartbroken to realize he had been a clueless pawn in a much larger, racist game. The emotional high was the shocking empathy and poetic justice of his reaction. Sterling Jr. felt true disgust for his family's actions. He realized his father had treated him with the same cruel condescension he had shown Sarah. He looked at Sarah, not with smugness, but with genuine guilt. He confessed his father was obsessed with status and hiding his crimes. He offered to help Sarah. "He's paranoid," Sterling Jr. said, his voice thick with betrayal. He wouldn't trust the cloud. Before he got this big office, he kept all his real secrets in the old one on the 4th floor, the one they use for storage now. He even kept the key. He then handed Sarah a tarnished silver key, a physical piece of evidence that promised to unlock the final secrets. It was a complete reversal of fortune. The villain of Chapter 3 was now a reluctant, desperate ally against his own blood. The final, extreme event of the chapter was the plan they hatched. Sterling Jr. would distract his father while Sarah, using her corporate access and the old key, would infiltrate the decommission office. The fate of Finch Corporation and the quiet dignity of Maeve's legacy rested on a desperate break-in orchestrated by the very man who once accused her of being a thief. The air in the Finch Corporation tower felt electric and cold. Sarah, Alistair, and Sterling Jr. moved like operatives under the cover of a late-night system audit. This was the high-stakes, climactic action of the story. The initial low event was the near miss. As Sarah approached the old office on the fourth floor, a security alert flashed on her phone. Sterling Vance Sr. had anticipated the breach and executed a counterplan, remotely wiping the hard drive in Sarah's primary work computer and sending an anonymous report framing her for a company-wide data leak. Sarah froze, her heart racing. Her access was about to be revoked, making her look guilty. She had minutes. The emotional high of the chapter was the breakthrough. Using the silver key, she slipped into the dusty, old office. It was a time capsule of Sterling Sr.'s history. Following Sterling Jr.'s advice, she ignored the outdated computer and found a loose panel behind a bookshelf. There, hidden inside a small, fireproof safe, was not a hard drive, but a miniature, air-gapped server. It contained all the evidence: the fully functional, marketable version of the racist AI software, the encrypted contracts for its sale, and a detailed ledger of the Vance family's decades-long attempts to seize Maeve's land. As Sarah downloaded the data, the door to the old office burst open. Sterling Vance Sr. stood in the doorway, his face twisted in a snarl of pure rage and defeat. He had seen the security breach and rushed to the one place he knew his secrets were kept. "You think a viral video could save you, little girl?" He spat, his eyes burning with fury. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The tension of the present dissolved as Sarah sat by Maeve's bedside, the elderly woman recovering from a particularly bad night. With the Vance family finally exposed and Sterling Sr. facing charges, Sarah was ready to tell Maeve everything, to share the victory. But first, Maeve had more to confess. This was the low event, the intimate, painful telling of the full truth. Maeve revealed that the man who had tried to steal her land years ago was Sterling Vance Sr.'s father and her former boss. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was cruel, firing her unjustly and using his influence to make her life miserable after she refused his unethical demands. The land, Maeve explained, wasn't just about money to the Vances. It was about pride. It was a symbolic piece of property near their family's ancestral farm. The emotional high was the shocking generational connection that closed the loop. Sarah realized the store incident was not just a random act of racism, but the son acting out the father's generational hatred, a deep-seated belief that people like Maeve and Sarah were inherently lesser. Maeve's quiet strength wasn't just about winning the property. It was about surviving a systematic, decades-long attempt to crush her dignity. "The day you walked into that store, Sarah," Maeve whispered, "you weren't just buying a laptop. You were fighting a battle that started before you were born. And you won." Sarah felt a deep, profound sense of poetic justice. The laptop, bought with the money she earned through her incredible mind, the mind they tried to tell her was worthless, was the final proof that Maeve had raised a champion. The following days were a whirlwind of consequence and change. Sterling Vance Sr. was arrested, and the news of the systemic racism within Finch Corporation shocked the nation. The low event was the sad, final phone call with Bryn. Bryn was contrite, but the betrayal was too deep to mend. They agreed, quietly and without drama, that their friendship was truly over, a necessary but painful act of closure. The emotional high was the overwhelming victory and validation. Alistair Finch offered Sarah a permanent senior partnership in the company, giving her the resources to turn her bias-detecting AI into a nationwide consulting firm. But the highest point was a quiet evening on the porch swing, just Sarah and Maeve. Sarah showed Maeve the news reports, the headlines confirming Sterling Sr. as downfall. Maeve wept, tears of relief and pride mixing as she grasped Sarah's hand. "You got our house back, baby girl," she whispered. "You didn't just get the house back. You got our name back." As the sun set, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known before. The revenge was complete, the heartbreak avenged. Maeve smiled, but then a look of deep, knowing concern crossed her face, a final, mysterious shadow before the victory. "There's just one more thing about that land, Sarah," she said softly. "One last secret. The final twist of the story came not from the corporate world, but from the spiritual one. Maeve revealed the truth about the land. The Vance family wasn't trying to develop it. They were desperate to buy it because the first Sterling Vance, the man who had tormented Maeve, was buried illegally on that plot of land. Maeve had won the property, and in doing so, she had blocked the man who tried to ruin her life from ever having his final, peaceful resting place there. It was a subtle, years-long act of poetic, silent vengeance, a profound act of resistance. Sarah gasped, realizing her grandmother's fight was deeper and darker than she ever knew. But the story didn't end in darkness. The ultimate high, the final, heartwarming twist of kindness and empathy was revealed when Sarah signed the partnership agreement for her new tech firm. The CEO of the partner firm was introduced, a successful, sharp woman named Ilera, who was Maeve's estranged younger sister. Ilera had been quietly funding Maeve's legal battles and health crises for years, working in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The final scene is set months later. Sarah, Maeve, and Ilera are standing on Maeve's porch, the three generations of women united. Sarah's AI firm is thriving, built on the principle that the power of technology should always be used to lift people up. The heartbreak and betrayal were stepping stones. The real triumph was the love and strength found in unexpected family and the unwavering resolve to choose empathy over revenge. If this story made you gasp, cry, or cheer, hit that like button and let me know which chapter surprised you the most. And if you want to see Sarah's journey continue, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video.